Now I'm running away, my dear, from myself and the truth I fear. My heart is beating, I can't see clear. How I'm wishing that you were here. You said you'd follow me anywhere, but your eyes tell me you won't be there. I gotta learn how to love without you. I gotta carry my cross without you. Stuck in a minute that I'm just about to figure it out without you. I'm going body inclined without you. Why do I feel like I'm drowning? Like I'm running out of air. Why do I feel like I'm falling when I'm nowhere near the edge? Just let me know. Can you be the one to hold and not let me go? I need to know. Could you be the one to go when I lose control? When I lose control. 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 You be the one to go when I lose control.
Yeah. What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We're here.
That's right.
We're here.
Swole Bros.
Swole Bros.
We didn't lose it during this whole quarantine season.
It's coming back.
That's right. Welcome to the second week of this series that we're in. We are the church. And this series, we've only had 1 week so far and one story, but man, it's already been heavy hitting.
It has, yeah. We always talk about how we are the church, but in this series, I really feel like we are the church.
That's right. And we are hearing from other people, hearing their stories, hearing from other perspectives. And even though it's probably not the most popular thing to do right now, it's the right thing to do, to sit down, have a conversation with somebody, hear from somebody who maybe has a different perspective than you, maybe has a different outlook. And so instead of doing this a whole lot right now, we need to use our eyes and our ears and also open up our hearts to hear what's going on from another point of view. So thank you so much for tuning in with us today. I want to let you know of a couple things that we do every single week. One of those is we have the opportunity to return a tithe.
And bring an offering.
A tithe is 10% of our income, and an offering is anything above and beyond that. So one of those ways is the website.
Yeah, wearetherising.com. That's the way our pastor gives and his wife. You can set up an account, super easy. Take you a couple minutes.
That's right. And you can also set up an account to give via text message. So this is how my family, it is.
I do it that way too.
You have your phone on you most of the time.
Yep.
So this is the way that our family returns our tithe, is via text message. All you have to do is text the number 45777 with the amount you'd like to give, space, keyword, the rising. All one word, all put together. Either way, thank you so much for being a church that lives with open hands, who lives generously. It's evident based on what we've seen throughout this time. Giving has been really great, and you guys have been killing it. So thank you so much for continuing to honor God in your tithes and your offerings. Like I said, we are continuing the series, We Are the Church. Jeremy and I are super excited to be here. We cannot wait for end of this month as well. We're gonna be meeting in person again like we did back at the end of June.
Yes.
So we're gonna be in person again, but before we get to that, we're gonna do a couple more online. We're gonna gather online, but it's all good, baby. That's what technology does. Sit close to your screens, be excited about what's gonna happen today. Open your hearts, open your minds, take some notes.
Take notes.
And let's get right to it.
All right.
When we think about the 2,000-year history of the church, we see God continually and constantly seeking to help people understand that the church is open for all people. Like, one of the things I say quite often, and it's based from the truth of the scriptures, is that God loves you for who you are and not as you should be, because none of us are as we should be. And regardless of who you are, where you've been, and what you've done, God loves you. And I say that statement because it's grace. It's grace, it's grace, it's grace, and God's grace is greater than anything we can imagine, right? It's grace, and it's rooted in the constant progression we see, especially in the book of Acts, where God is showing people that the church, His church, is open to all people. Early on, when the church first began, Jesus had already been crucified, resurrected, and ascended to heaven, and he sent His Spirit to empower those who followed Him on the day of Pentecost. In those early days, see the church was just a handful of people, but then on the day of Pentecost, it grew to 3,000 people. But in those early days, the church was only open for Jews who became Christians, followers of Jesus, right? This is what the leaders of the church thought, that Jesus came to save Jews, God's chosen people. So those who could be Christians and part of the church were Jewish converts. That's who the church was open to. And if you read through the book of Acts in the Bible, because this is the history of the start of the church, what you'll see is that for the first 7 chapters, the church is just Jewish converts. And then Stephen, the first Christian martyr, is killed, and the church scatters all over the area for fear of persecution. Well, Philip, one of the Christians who dispersed, traveled to Samaria. And if you watched last week, then the Jews and Samaritans hated one another, right? I mean, the Samaritans were mixed Jews, not pure blood, and there was racism and division amongst the Jews and the Samaritans. Well, Jesus explained one time that even Samaritans, those people in that other group that you don't like, they're your neighbor, and they're people that you should love. So Philip goes to Samaria, and he finds that the people there are open to the good news about Jesus. Not only that, but they start speaking in different languages. They're speaking in tongues, which was a sign that they somehow received God's Spirit. And so in Acts chapter 8, Philip reasons, well, I mean, if God has given these half-Jews His Spirit, then maybe He's not just the God of the Jews, but He's also the God of the Samaritans as well. And maybe His church is open even to them. And so He baptizes them. And so there's this revelation that, okay, well, the church isn't just for Jewish converts, but it's also for Samaritans who are in a different group than we are. And so God must be accepting them as well. And then later, in Acts chapter 10 and 11, Peter, one of the guys who hung out with Jesus, was asked to come to Cornelius' house. Now, Cornelius was a Gentile. I mean, he wasn't Jewish. He wasn't even half Jewish. He was the opposite of Jewish. And Jewish law forbade Peter to go to his house. But God showed up to Peter in a vision, letting him know it was okay for him to go to Cornelius' house. And so Peter reluctantly went, even after God told him to go. He reluctantly goes to meet Cornelius and his family, these people who weren't Jewish or even part of being Jewish, like Samaritans. But he goes to meet them, and he finds that they're open to hearing the good news about Jesus. And then they start speaking in different languages. They start speaking in tongues. Again, this sign that God had given them His Holy Spirit, like He did for those followers on the day of Pentecost, and like He did for those in Samaria. And Peter reasoned, if God has given them His Spirit, I guess that means He's accepted even Gentiles. Like people who have no Jewish background and heritage, I guess He's accepted them too. I guess God's church is open to everyone. And so Peter baptizes Cornelius and his family, and word gets out about this, and the people of the church have a problem with this. The people in the Jerusalem church have a problem with this. We can't have Peter baptizing people who aren't Jewish or Samaritans. So they call Peter into this meeting in Acts chapter 11, and Peter explains what happened. He explains his actions, and after they heard Peter's explanation, here's what their response was. When they heard this, they had no further objections and praised God, saying, "So then, even to Gentiles God has granted repentance that leads to life." Oh well, awesome. I guess the church is open not only for Jewish and Samaritan converts, but also to Gentiles. We guess anybody could be a part of the church and accept God's love. And here's what I find fascinating about all this. God uses individuals to help people accept groups, right? God uses individuals to help people accept groups. Like when early Jewish Christians thought of Samaritans, they were those half-breeds who had compromised their faith. Jews actually called Samaritans dogs. But then Jesus tells a story about one Samaritan so that people could look past the group stereotypes and see a person. And in Acts chapter 8, God uses a handful of people that Philip met to give greater insight into the whole group. In Acts chapter 10, God introduces Peter to a person so that he could see the whole group differently. See, when we tend to think about groups and what we see are groups, it's easy for us to paint with broad brushstrokes and make the relationship us versus them, our group versus their group, right? Those black people, those white people, those cops, those gay people, those immigrants, those Republicans, those Democrats, those fill in the blank with whatever group you want, right? When we see groups, it's us versus them. But when we move from a group to a person, now we see that person's story. Now we see their background, their history, their experience, their strengths, their fears. And when we zoom in to see people at a human level, it can give us greater insight to love and appreciate and care for and empathize with them. Like, this is the command we live by if we're Christians. A new command I give you, Jesus said, love one another. As I've loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you're my disciples if you love one another. Here's how this looks practically. For the whole law can be summed up in one command: love your neighbor as yourself. But if you're always biting and devouring one another, watch out. Beware of destroying one another. See, to love our neighbor as ourselves, we have to see the individual. You know, there's one more person that I want to introduce you to in the opening of the church 2,000 years ago. That same guy, Philip, who was in Samaria, he was told by God's Spirit to run up to a chariot that was traveling down the road. And so Philip runs up to the chariot, and inside is an Ethiopian eunuch who's reading from the book of Isaiah. And this man from Ethiopia is black. Philip is Jewish. So Philip, he's Middle Eastern. Probably he has olive skin, right? So they look different from one another. God says, I want you to go to that person who looks different from you. And the Ethiopian, he isn't Jewish. He's Gentile, which means Philip shouldn't even be interacting with him. Hey, I want you to go and talk to that guy who believes differently than you do. And on top of that, the Ethiopian was a eunuch. See, he served the queen of Ethiopia, and a practice that happened in history for men who serve royalty is that they be castrated so as to be able to serve efficiently and not be distracted by sexual urges. So I want you to go to this guy who lives very different from you. And so according to Philip's good Jewish upbringing, this guy, this Ethiopian eunuch, was cut off from God. But God's Spirit led Philip over to the chariot because he wanted to show Philip this man. And he wanted to show Philip the extent of his great grace and how the church was open, even to him. So Philip runs up to the chariot and he hears the eunuch reading from the book of Isaiah. And he asks, hey, do you know what you're reading? And the guy says, I have no clue. Can you explain it to me? And then he invites Philip up into the chariot. And here's what happens. Then Philip began with that very passage of Scripture and told him the good news about Jesus. As they traveled along the road, they came to some water, and the eunuch said, look, here's water. What can stand in the way of my being baptized? See, the question the eunuch asks here is essentially, is there room even for me in God's kingdom? Here's why. Because in the Old Testament law, it says there isn't room for him. In the Old Testament law, it says, nope, not you. I want to read this to you. Now listen, we're going to use some adult words here, okay? Just reading from the Bible, Fair warning, so you know. Deuteronomy 23:1 says, if a man's testicles are crushed or his penis is cut off, he may not be admitted to the assembly of the Lord. This is what has happened to the eunuch. And Deuteronomy 23:1 says, you're out. So the eunuch is saying, hey, Philip, is there room in the church even for me? Is there space for me? And remember, God's Spirit is the one who told Philip to go over to the man and talk to him. Why? Because God's telling him, he's letting him know, yeah, there's room, and there's space, and there's grace, even for you. So what can stand in the way of my being baptized? Philip's reaction implies that the answer is nothing. Nothing stands in the way because there's room even for you. Nothing stands in the way, not even that's happened to you. Acts 8:38, and he gave orders to stop the chariot. Then both Philip and the eunuch went down into the water, and Philip baptized him. See, the ultimate declaration from God through all these different examples is this: my church is open for everyone. My grace is bigger than you can imagine. Regardless of who you are, where you've been, and what you've done, the truth is God loves you. And I don't know who needs to hear that this morning, but this is a word for you, that you are loved by God as you are and not as you should be, because none of us are as we should be. And it took God helping Philip see a person, not a group. It took God helping Philip hear a story, see an experience, to see that his church was open for all people. I want to introduce you to Elana. So, Elana, you're part of our church. You've been part of our church for years. I mean, you were baptized in our church.
Yep.
And you're someone who's come to our church with a different story than most people.
That's right. Very different.
Right. You know, and I'll just be so open with you.
It's fine.
Throughout this series. In this series, We Are the Church. This is one where I'm excited about this series, but I'm also scared in doing this series. I'm excited because I want to use the platform that I have as best I can to help people see people. And again, we often see people in groups and paint with broad brushstrokes and put people into categories and all that stuff. And so what I want to do is, I just really believe that we're called to love our neighbor. I believe we're called to love our enemy. I believe we're called to love people who are like us, who are not like us.
Yeah.
Like it's love, right? Jesus said, a new command I give you, love one another. I think the only way we can love one another is see not groups, but see individuals, see people, and hear their stories. And so I'm excited about this series to help put people like you on a platform, in a space where people can hear your story, hear your experience. But I'm also scared because I know we live in a society where it's either I agree with you or disagree with you, and if I disagree with you, I'm done with you. And or there's
there.
yeah, and we live in a society with but what abouts, and we live in a society of judgment. So part of me is scared because I'm hoping people will see this and be open to reflecting on their own thoughts and judgments and assessments, and not just write this off or not get mad, because when it comes to homosexuality, transgender, and by the way, homosexuality and transgender, I'm learning are two different things.
Totally different things.
Right?
Totally.
Yeah.
And I'm straight, so I don't.
Right. And so when it comes to things like that, like often the quick jump is, but that's wrong.
Yeah.
And there's this, that's wrong. And, I think about a lot of stuff in my life that's wrong, that I do.
We all have wrong things. I mean, we
Right.
all do wrong things
Right.
or dumb things that we've done in the past or whatever.
Yeah, and so the question then is, okay, how do we look past that and see God's grace, and then still love people who are different than us? And so my hope is that that's what people will see in this.
My hope is too.
Tell us about, and I remember when I met you, and I had all kinds of questions because I just didn't know. I just didn't know what I didn't know, right? And so, just so people know, you're a transgendered woman, and I know when we talked before, you said you don't even like that term transgender.
I don't like that term at all. But it's okay.
Yeah, you just consider yourself a woman.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear. We'll talk about why you don't like that term. And again, it groups people.
Yeah.
It's really
that label that I don't like.
Yeah. It's everything that we're talking about. Not seeing groups, but seeing individuals. But when we met years ago, I just had all kinds of questions about this decision to go all the way and going from being a man to a woman, and how help people understand just your experience growing up, because I think a lot of questions people have. I know questions I had were, what makes someone make that decision? Why would someone do that? It's just a big question mark, right?
Yeah.
So help me understand your experience and how you felt just growing up.
Of course. Right? So like you mentioned before, transitioning from a man to a woman, to me it was more, I was always a woman. I just presented as a man, and then I kind of came out, and then everybody saw that transition. So for me, my whole life, it was two lifestyles that I lived. I lived my hidden lifestyle of being around, men and dating men and being with men. And then I lived the one that I thought society would, require me to be with, which was being with women, and kept those two lifestyles separate from everybody because I thought one was right and one was wrong, even though the one that I thought was right was what everybody else thought was wrong. So then when I came out, I kind of got rid of that piece of my life and did what I felt was right.
Yeah, so you said, so I mentioned going from a man to a woman. You said, I just felt like I've always been a woman my whole life. Now some people would say, but you were born with the anatomy of a man. Like you were born that way. So how can you be born in this, with the physical anatomy of a man, and yet feel like a woman? How would you explain that?
So I had a lot of complications at birth as well that were problems leading up to that. So not only was I had problems with, like I almost didn't make it. I had jaundice. I had, they broke my shoulder blades to get me out of my mom. I had some complications as well. And my mom even thought that she was having a woman as well, or a baby girl. And when she told me that, it was like the biggest relief I've ever had or dealt with, because it felt like my whole life that I was always meant to be a woman, and I came out and my whole world changed.
Yeah. So some would say, are you saying like God made a mistake then because you were born a certain way and you felt another way? What would you say to that? How would you respond?
I've heard that before, and I don't feel like God made a mistake. Maybe the complication of the birth maybe had something to do with it. Maybe there was some type of, problem greater than what I know that happened. Yeah. Do I feel like God made a mistake? No, I feel like God made me who I am, and that's kind of who I am. So
and that's like a mind-blowing thing for me to for me to wrap my mind around that, because I don't know your experience.
Yeah,
and
of course.
I haven't grown up feeling what you feel and knowing what you know. And so when I hear that, and I think maybe people are like me and hear that, they may think, but no, how? But then at the same time, I don't know. So for people So for people like me, who when I hear that, I'm like, I don't know what that's even like, because that's not my experience, and I haven't experienced what you experienced, I haven't felt what you felt, so I have no idea. So it's seeing things. It's shifting to see things differently. It's like, I think if someone, so I'm a heterosexual male, and if somebody were to ask me like, hey, at what point did you know you were a heterosexual male? I'd just be like, well, I just always knew.
Yeah.
Like there wasn't a point where I knew. I just always knew. So when I think about it in those terms, if someone were to ask you, hey, when did you feel this way, or when did you know, or when did you make the decision to become a woman, you would say, well, I've just always felt like
It's very
a woman.
true. I've always felt like that.
So that's a good parallel then to make.
It is,
huh?
yeah.
And so growing up, one of the questions people often ask is and even talking about homosexuality or someone who's transgendered, sometimes people think, well, something traumatic happened in their life, or something caused them to be this way. Was there anything like that for you? Or
Not growing up, no.
No.
Other than my birth, there was no traumatic experiences or anything that pushed me to be that way. It was always, I am who I am.
This is who I am.
This is who I am.
And you said for so long you felt like you had to be somebody else.
That's correct.
And you lived a dual life. Tell us more about that.
So I lived 2 lives for as long as I can remember, probably far back as 5, to where I would hide certain aspects about what I thought was right. And then, you learn from society and around other people how you're supposed to act, how you're supposed to be, and that didn't feel like who I was. So then I would hide this other part of my life from everybody forever until I came out and I felt that release come. So me finding God and coming out was almost one in one. It was just like this darkness release from myself, and then everything made sense. Everything was right. I cut the other part of my life out. I completely came out. I found God in the same time, and here I am.
Yeah. So as you were growing up then, is it safe to say you felt like an imposter?
Yeah, of
Okay.
course.
So living
relationships, friendships, all of it.
So living a life you felt was expected from you because of your physical gender, and then doing battle with also how you felt inside. So you're living this dual. How did you feel about yourself when you were living this dual lifestyle?
It was very depressive. I went through all kinds of experiences. I tried to escape. I've tried to, release myself through drugs. I tried to remove my physical, aspect from it, trying to cope with living this dual life.
Yeah. So you were depressed. You said you tried to escape, like through drugs.
Through drugs. Yeah. Of course.
So it sounds like you had no peace.
Yeah. There was no peace.
Yeah. And you mentioned too a darkness that you felt. Tell me about that darkness.
Yeah. So in my past, I grew up, I fell into Satanism. I kind of made sense to me. I kind of fell into that and went down that path because it allowed me to do basically whatever I wanted to do and not have any guilt or problems with what I was doing. So then as I was guilted into coming to church, which I was, I won't lie, it ended up being the greatest thing and experience that I've ever dealt with. But as I came to church, I could slowly feel this darkness kind of going away. And then it was just like God was speaking to me, telling me, that I don't need that, I don't need those things. And then all this darkness just slowly just went away.
Yeah. And so you engaged in drugs and trying to escape, really to try and medicate how you felt.
Yeah.
To
cope with depression.
Yeah. Gotcha. And then when you said, okay, I'm finally going to be me, like I'm going to be my true self, how I feel I am and how I've been for so long. That's when you found freedom.
Yep,
And
exactly.
that's when light came in. Gotcha.
Had nothing but happiness since. It's crazy since I've come out.
So help me understand, what about if someone were to say, yeah, okay, I know you felt that way and feel that way, but why don't you just change that? Like, why don't you just not feel that way, or why don't you change your thinking or whatever, right? Like, just don't do that. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, so I wish it was that simple. It's really not that simple. Living the dual lifestyle, because that's what I was doing. One was right, one was wrong, so I got rid of the wrong one.
Yeah.
And then that was just like, it was always that way. So everything felt right. And it wasn't just, oh, one day I chose to be a woman. No, that's not how.
So it was never like this choice that you felt you made.
Yeah, exactly.
It was just like, this is who I am, and it's always felt that way.
And then now it's everybody's gonna know, everybody's gonna see, this is me.
Yeah.
Blending of that world or whatever, and getting rid of that darkness.
And I think again, I would liken it to if someone said to me, like, if being heterosexual male was wrong, and someone said to me, hey, you got to change that, I'd be like, I have no idea how to do that.
Where to start or where to begin or any of that.
This is just who I am, and this is what I know, and this is, so, okay, I can see that. How, and you even said, as you were feeling these things, you were wondering, what's wrong with me, right? And you were feeling that depression, you were feeling like an imposter, and you even went to try and fix.
Yeah, I went and tried to fix it.
What was wrong with you? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I tried to fix the wrongness that I thought was wrong, and I went to SAA and tried to fix those situations and problems and all that stuff, which to me it didn't feel like it needed to be fixing. I know you go to an anonymous group to not help yourself or whatever, but to me it was, they were kind of the wrong, and it didn't really help me. It didn't really get me to what I needed.
Yeah.
Was it beneficial? Maybe, but I didn't feel like there was a problem to fix.
Right. Yeah. And so, so when you made the decision to come out and go all in, and being who you feel you are, again, you said you felt this freedom and this light pour in, but I imagine it's been difficult for you as well.
Oh yeah.
Because so tell us about some of the difficulties.
Yeah, I've had a lot of difficulties. I've been removed from jobs. I've been fired from jobs, groups, friends, family. I've had issues with people not communicating to me, or don't feel like I'm a person, either male or female.
Yeah.
They don't treat me as a person at all, so I'm like the lowest thing that they've ever dealt with or talked to. I've had people talk bad to me. I've had situations where I felt very like I was in a dangerous situation and I couldn't get out of it. So like the instance I was doing Lyft as like a car, the car, doing it myself, driving people around, and I had a situation where I had a drunk guy get in the car. He was obviously very big and muscular. There was not a lot I could do, and he continued to trash talk me the whole time that he was in the car, calling me names, saying bad things. I thought he was going to physically hurt me, but like, I'm in the middle of the ride. What am I supposed to do? If I pull over, he's not going to get out, and if he does, what's going to happen? So I had to sit there and take it, and I never did it ever again. So I have tons of situations that are like that.
Yeah. What are some other situations?
So for instance, I've had situations where people don't believe me. Like my dad is like that. He doesn't believe it. It's so much to where he's said bad things or done bad things or mentioned bad things and completely has left my life.
Yeah.
Like I had to set that boundary to where I can no longer deal with you anymore and talk to you in that level. So yeah.
And there's times, I imagine, where you have to be aware of where you are in your surroundings and situations.
Yeah, so like it's, for me, I got to be careful when I go somewhere alone. Like for instance, I can't go to just a bar alone sometimes, even though I do it because I don't let that rule my life. However, I've had situations where people talk to me in the bar or say bad things or talk to me about bathroom situations or stuff like that, and it's very frustrating and scary to be able to not be able to go anywhere that anyone else could on their own.
So we mentioned earlier the term transgender, right? And you said you don't like that. So how do you feel about that, and what do you prefer? How do you identify?
Yeah, so for me, it immediately puts me in a label or a box or a category that you already admit that I am not like you.
Right.
So that's why I don't like it. A lot of people do like it and embrace it and all that, and that's fine. That's your prerogative. But for me, I'm a woman. To me, I want to be classified as such, dealt with such, and not segregated out like a transgender person would, or a special bathroom or a special this or a special that some jobs or people do. I don't like that at all.
Yeah. So as we talk about bathrooms, and this, I imagine that's probably a lot of conversations people want to have with you.
A lot of people do have that conversation with me.
Like they're really curious about using the bathroom. Like
they think that I'm gonna go into the bathroom with some random person and they're gonna get. I'm like the most harmless person you've ever met. And if anybody ever knows me, I'm not. A, I can't fight. B, I can't fight. And there's nothing I'm going to ever say or do to anybody that's really going to hurt or do anything.
So, and I think the concern, and so now from hearing from your perspective, it's enlightening. I think the concern people have, and I know it was in the news several years back about transgender bathrooms or unisex
I've heard
bathrooms,
it all.
is that people think, oh, but you're a man going into a woman's bathroom, and you're saying, no, hello, my whole life I felt like a woman. I'm a woman going into a woman's bathroom.
Exactly.
And so that's just how you feel from the essence. And so there's no like, oh yeah, I want to go into a women's bathroom and see women. It's like, no, I have a woman.
Perspective of both, I've been in both. They're both dirty. So don't even say they're not. They're both dirty. I've been in both.
Yeah. So Elana, what would you say? What would you tell someone who just doesn't understand or has questions about transgendered people in general?
Yeah, well, for one, if anybody wants to talk to me about any of it, they are more than welcome to. I will mention or talk or tell my story.
And you've been so open with that.
Yeah,
which is
I've been
great.
It's part of who I am. That's what helps people come to church, where, I don't let anything hold me back.
Yeah.
But if anybody has anything or worried or any of that, I'm just a woman like any other woman that you've ever dealt with, and sometimes even more so than women that I know. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I mentioned in the beginning, you are the church. You're part of this church. And I love the way that you've jumped in, you serve, you give of yourself.
Yeah. Don't miss a week.
Yeah. And I just love how you take ownership in being the church. And the scriptures say that every knee will bow, every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord, and that in heaven it's made up of people of different tribes, tongues, and nations. And I think there will be a lot of people who don't look like us, think like us, live like us, who will be in heaven because they've accepted Jesus, because they've said yes to Him, and they are the church. And I'm just so glad you're part of this movement and that you're part of this church.
Me too. Me too. And if anybody wants to talk about any of it or wants to know any more of my story, they're more than welcome to reach out. But as far as what you were saying with judgment, I get a lot of judgment from a lot of people, mostly primarily Christians over regular people as well. So if anybody is on the fence about that, yeah, you can talk to me about it if you like.
Well, I appreciate you being so open. Thank you for sharing your story. And I appreciate you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wow, what a great sermon today, and what a great interview from Elana, wasn't it?
Yes.
Man, I know I gained some understanding and
Very
learned
much.
some things about her I didn't know.
Absolutely, and that's what we've been doing throughout this series. So last week we heard from Micah, this week we heard from Elana, next week we're going to hear from someone else. And the reason that we're doing this is to show we are the church.
That's right. Maybe we need to hear from you.
Yeah.
Do you have a story you need to tell us?
Yes, absolutely.
We would love to hear it. Leave it in the comments section below or send an instant message. Either way, whatever you're comfortable with, we would love to hear your story.
Right, because during this series, what we're learning is that we are not just groups of people, but we're individuals. All of us have a past.
Right.
All of us have a purpose. All of us have a
Right.
story and a perception of things. And it's good to have those difference of opinions sometimes.
Right.
But it's also good just to get to know people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
thanks so much for joining us today. We are excited that you're with us. By the way, if it's your first time,
If it is your first time, welcome.
Yeah.
And we're glad that you're here.
we are glad you're here. Go ahead and let us know in the comments if it's your first time. We'd love to reach out to you just to say, hey, thanks for tuning in. But if you're interested in learning more about who we are and following us and getting caught up with some of the things that we've been doing, you can do that right here on Facebook.
Yeah.
You can also do it on our website, wearetherising.com. You can see all kinds of older messages,
Yeah.
all our videos that are on there.
Right. You can go back and check out the podcast from
Yes.
years and years of really good stuff.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I highly recommend if you haven't checked that out.
All that stuff is on our website. Also want to remind you, if you tuned in with us a little bit late, shame on you, by the way. You're at home. What are you doing? You can be here on time. It's totally easy, 10 o'clock every single Sunday. But hey,
Slept in.
no
Slept
judgment.
in.
It's all
Okay.
good. Everybody's got a story. If you're joining us a little bit late, you may not know that every single week we can also return our tithe and bring our offering.
Right.
10% of our income is a tithe.
Yeah, an offering is anything that goes beyond that 10%. There's two simple ways you can do this.
Usually there's three
Usually
if
there's
we're
three.
meeting in person.
Yeah.
But we can't actually, if you pull out a check,
Right.
you
right.
have no one to hand it to right now.
Yeah. If you got cash, you're looking to. Never mind.
Yeah.
But
You can mail it in, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Right.
Anyways, you can go to our website, wearetherising.com/give, set up an online account there. You can also text 45777, the amount you'd like to give, plus keyword The Rising. But regardless of the way you decide to give.
it's just great that you give because, isn't it good to give to something great?
Yeah.
And I've heard that giving actually lowers your blood pressure. You can Google that. I think there's research that supports that data.
There might
So,
be.
Hey, there you go.
I'll talk to my doctor about it. But giving is really great because it reminds us of all the things that we have are actually God's. And this is an
Absolutely.
opportunity for us to say, God, I'm going to follow you with everything of my being, including my finances. So
Right.
thank you so much for living
Thank you.
open-handed. Make sure to be here with us next week, 10 a.m. We're going to be here
Yes.
online. We're going to continue this series. We're
We'll
going to
be
hear
here on
from
time.
another. That's right. On
right.
time. We're going to hear from another person, another different point of view, another perspective. Can't wait to see what God has in store for all of us. And we will see you guys
See you next
Sunday,
week.
10 a.m.
See you guys.